What's up, guys? It's Jeff. Welcome back. And if this looks familiar, it's because I accidentally recorded it with no audio. But today we're going to go over the four-step process to win basically any game, right? Now, this applies to Dota 2, Counter-Strike, Valorant, Rainbow Six Siege, League of Legends, but we're going to be doing it through the Overwatch and Marvel Rivals lens because that's where it's most applicable to the players I'm working with currently. Later, we'll do a video transposing it onto other games so that you can kind of see the fundamental application of what I'm about to talk about, right? But what we're going over here are what makes up the core of my philosophy of how to win the game, and it's the four-step advantage process. So, number one, the first advantage, the best advantage that we can secure is man advantage. Now, man advantage, this applies to a lot of different things in a lot of different games, but in a hero shooter, it's pretty straightforward. You have one more player than the enemy. That's either local or that's cross-mapped by way of killing a player on the enemy team. But killing a player on the enemy team is often hard, and it often requires the expenditure of something that does that very quickly and easily. And that is where we get into the second best advantage, which is resource advantage, right? So resource advantage rears its head in a lot of ways. So we're going to talk about it probably the longest of any of these. And what it comes down to is anything that can be spent is a resource. Do you have more time on the objective, more percentage, more cart distance? You can spend that. That's a resource. Do you have more cooldowns? You can spend those. That's a resource. Do you have health? You can spend that. That's a resource, right? So anything that you can spend is a resource. And, in some games, it's very straightforward. Like in Counter-Strike, you've got nades and weapons. Like an AWP is a very expensive weapon. You spent money to get that AWP. Money's a resource. The weapons are resources that you maintain on your team. It's very direct. In Overwatch, mostly what you're thinking about is cooldowns and ultimates. Ultimates are a big resource because they take a long time to charge, and they're pretty good at either generating man advantage or denying the enemy team's generation of man advantage. Now, the thing that ties into that most, right, that denial of man advantage, the expenditure of resources to attain it, is when we're talking about like a support ultimate, which generates a massive amount of resources for your team. This can be really important in a lot of situations, but it's mostly important in a situation when you have a resource disadvantage, which usually occurs by way of having a positional disadvantage, right? And so a positional advantage is our third most valuable advantage here. Now, what is this in Overwatch terms? Well, you're the defenders, you have positional advantage because you're already set up in the positions that you want to play. You're maintaining line of sight to your teammates. You're on high ground. You're difficult to access. You're far away from the enemy team. There's a lot of different ways that you can gain a positional advantage, but the easiest one is to walk into it, and preferably away from the enemy team's fire. That's why the defending team starts with a positional advantage because they got to walk into all those positions without spending any resources to do it. For the attacking team, they almost always need to spend resources to get into good positions. So they trade a resource advantage for a positional advantage, moving them in the wrong direction on this ladder, but we'll talk about how that's valuable later. Now, one way you can gain a positional advantage and spend less resources is by maintaining an information advantage, right? Now, for those of you who are coming from attack shooter, this is pretty straightforward. If you're a Counter-Strike player and you're looking at the entire enemy team with wall hacks, then it's pretty easy to determine where to go, what resources you need to spend, and how you're going to kill the enemy team without spending more than you should, right? It's so powerful in attack shooter. But when you're looking at a game like Overwatch or Marvel Rivals, you're like, okay, well, what's the information advantage? For me, coming from a day and age where your teammates had to push Z in order for you to determine what their ults were so that you could estimate what the enemy ults were, ult economy is a big one. It's a lot easier now in the game, but it's still a huge information advantage that you can generate is knowledge of ult economy. I mean, miscalling an ult that they do or don't have can cost you a team fight because your whole team positions differently, therefore burns resources differently, therefore leaves themselves more vulnerable to losing a player to one of those big ultimates, right? So there's a lot of layers to that. Another one is just basic line of sight. You can cut like you're making a rotation in one direction, break line of sight for a little while and then come back through the same doorway. And the chance that the enemy has pre-moved in order to match your rotation is fairly high in Overwatch. It's very reliable, actually, to be able to fake a rotation on the enemy. That's why scouting information is so important. That's why keeping track of the enemy is so important. And I'm actually going to provide you a couple examples of that right here, because it's something that people doubt. And these are exaggerated examples, but they are good ones because they're happening at the absolute highest level of play that was ever available for this game. So here we're watching Surefour and his famous moment for the LA Gladiators. I'm just going to let the clip play, and you guys can see how all of these different advantages stack up over the course of this clip.
So nasty. Surefour's chilling in spawn. So he's waiting here. He can sort of walk out. What does he try to do?
I think he's gonna either switch to Widowmaker. Yep. He's gonna be the play. He's gonna switch to Widow.
I'm gonna call this the merry-go-round because it makes me laugh, makes me happy, and Surefour switches to the Widowmaker at just the right time. Closer drops down, and it's a day in the shooting range for Lane Roberts, the Canadian superstar.
This is against the Stage 1 champions. This is against MVP level players. It's one of the highest quality matchups ever played in Overwatch, and because of a simple lack of information and turning that into a powerful positioning play, the London Spitfire got pulled apart. We have another example. This one's a little bit more memey.
The best part of all of this is that they come into this with 6 ultimates ready to go.
Oh, I'm cracked, maybe. Oh my god, I can do it. I want to do it. I want to do it. Okay, let's go. Come on.
We're gonna do the meme grab. We're gonna do the meme grab.
Mean grab.
What is this? What are they doing right now?
3, 2, 1, go.
That is a really... You get over the roof there?
Oh my.
Oh my,
what a play. What a grab.
Tosses in the grab. They're gonna make
An ability that would have been so hard to land in that choke versus the defense matrix, which can consume the graviton entirely. We get to see Defran just over the top, launch it from 800 million miles away, right into the front of the enemy team, and totally destroy the defending team just by controlling the amount of information that they had, right? So when you think that information isn't important in a game like Overwatch or Marvel Rivals, just remember that at the very highest level of the most competitive hero shooter we've yet to see, whole team fights were won just by simple misinformation. So how does this apply to your game? How are we going to use this, right? Well, man advantage is what we're looking for. We're trying to get the man advantage. So how do we get man advantage? We spend resources. Well, what do our resources cost us, right? That usually costs us positioning, and we get positioning by having information, right? So we control the information game. We use that to gain positioning. A lot of times what we'll have to do is we'll have to spend resources to gain positioning, but then we use our positioning to generate a resource advantage. And by having a resource advantage, then we can go and we can take man advantage. And once we do that, what we need to do is we need to reset backwards, usually all the way to positioning again. So once we take man advantage, we need to make sure that we're positioned well to support each other, to not lose to a team that might have equivalent or favorable resources. And then we spend the rest of our resources to get another kill, because we should have an advantage over resources because we have more players, and then the resource advantage just snowballs from there, right? So this is a simple breakdown of the 4-step process of winning pretty much any game through an Overwatch lens, and as promised, at some point later, I will review this from a different game point of view, transpose it onto other games so that it's easier to understand for players in those games. But, like I said, for TAC players, this should be pretty straightforward. All right, if you guys have any questions, if there's anything you want to know, feel free to leave a comment. If the audio doesn't work again, I'm going to do things that are against YouTube terms and conditions. So yeah, hopefully this runs properly this time. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time. Peace.